So confession, I barely have to confess to Debbie and Dawn because they just came back from a week of interviewing candidates for ordination at the Board of Ordained Ministry. And my confession is that when I went through this more decades ago than I care to admit, when I was going for my probationary membership, we called them deacons' orders in those days, I almost didn't pass because they thought I didn't take Scripture seriously enough. Yeah, that's going to be a failure to come into this profession. And it was interesting because I had been in seminary and really delving into literary analysis of the Gospels, because I think they're just four of the best stories told on the face of the planet. I do take them very, very seriously. I hope you know that. But I'm always interested when the literary twist is different than what you would find in literature, because they are carefully crafted stories. And the interesting thing in John's gospel is he starts with the big reveal. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Like Jesus was there at Genesis chapter 1. Okay, most good writers would have waited a little longer for the big reveal, right? For instance, in The Wizard of Oz, you don't discover until the second time that Dorothy and her friends get to Oz that the wizard is a big fake. Right? The big news usually comes a little further in the story. But that's where the Gospels are more than just good stories. They're the good news of Jesus Christ. And actually, all four Gospels reveal very early on what a unique and amazing hero this man is. He's the light of the world. He's the light that the darkness cannot overcome. He is God's precious Son sent to save whoever believes in him. All the whoever's. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it happens right after his baptism. He goes into I'm not going to get the order quite right, but he goes into the temple, opens up chutzpah at age 30, to open up the scroll of Isaiah and say, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. I'm the one who's going to break the chains, release the captives, proclaim the good news to the downtrodden." I am the Messiah, he's proclaiming. The big reveal happens at the beginning of all of the Gospels. Now, from a literary standpoint, this makes no sense. We talked about it a lot in seminary, especially in our biblical studies classes. Like, why'd they do this? What I see here is a really important aspect of the Gospels, of the good news of Jesus Christ. And that is that he is the same. He knows from the beginning his calling, and he stays authentic to that calling all the way through, even to the death on a cross. And that's tricky, because there are plenty of times when it'd be easier to run away, when it'd be easier to say, I think maybe I'll slink back into the darkness, a little safer here in the shadows. But he always steps out front, draws a line in the sand to protect a woman caught in adultery, asks questions of scribes and Pharisees who would prevent healing on the Sabbath, insists on inclusion of the Samaritans and the unclean woman and the lepers and even a Roman centurion. Authenticity is the amazing gift that Jesus brings. And we don't have to wait till the end of the story to see what's behind the curtain, because he's out front the whole time. Symbolically, on Good Friday, the curtain is torn at the time of Jesus' death. There was a curtain that separated y'all, who weren't as holy as us all. Debbie and me, we'd be up here behind the curtain because we were closer to God than y'all. But Jesus changed all that. That curtain ripped to remind us that behind the curtain is a God who loves everyone, all the whoever's, no matter what. And that Jesus came to personify that deep, deep love. That unconditional, relentless, amazing love that knows no limits. There is no big reveal until there's a resurrection. And that's kind of a big reveal. The big reveal starts at the beginning, that in the beginning was the Word. The Word being Jesus, the Logos. And the Word was God. The Logos is God. And there was nothing that came into being except through him. That the Spirit of the Lord was upon him from the beginning to proclaim release to the captives, healing to the sick, hope to those in despair, new life even in the midst of death. Into this beautiful world, behind the curtain, God invites all of us in when God tears that curtain on Good Friday. So guess what? You all belong up here too. Now, we won't all fit, so I'm not going to make you all come up here. I have threatened to make a few of you preach a sermon, which would be really fun. But the point is that we are now the carriers of that light. We are the ones that have to keep revealing to people that there's no curtain separating us from God. There's no curtain separating them from God. There is no sin so deep, no mistake so huge, no shame so shameful that it can keep God's love and light from shining to us. The light of the world has come that all can see behind the curtain. And the light has come to invite us to bring that light, that story, that good news to all. To all. It's a beautiful invitation, but man, it seems kind of huge, right? You all get to be the light of the world. I get to be the light of the world, representing the light of the world with all caps. But here's the deal. We don't have to be the huge heroes that Jesus was. We just have to do our part. A heroic life is often a simple life well lived. Bringing light and love doesn't always have to be huge, but it does have to be consistent. It does have to be authentic. And that's what we see in the Jesus journey, is this consistent authenticity that is missing in so many of the people we laud as heroes. But it wasn't missing in Jesus. And through his grace, it doesn't need to be missing in us. Nancy Bailey sent me a hero story of somebody that I think lived this kind of an authentic, loving life. A simple life, but impactful enough that this was Nancy Bailey's hero. She writes to me, "Uncle John Mark is my hero. Uncle John Mark was a part of my life from a very early age. He stayed with us on several occasions as I was growing up, after he was in the military in Korea. During one of the times my dad wasn't around, Uncle John Mark went with me to a father-daughter event. He was always a happy-go-lucky person, like my grandmother. Optimistic, always had a joke or a funny story that cracked us all up. He loved taking funny jabs at all of us, and he was always ready to help with anything that needed to be done. He married a wonderful woman, Aunt Mary. They had a beautiful daughter whom they both adored. They never had much money, but when their daughter Donna picked out a prom dress that was $100, he found a way to get it for her. He was a devout Christian, taking on leadership roles in the church and helping out his neighbors. When my grandparents aged, Uncle John Mark took on the task of caring for them. He was diagnosed with leukemia later in life, but he didn't let that slow him down. he continued to maintain a quarter-acre garden by hand, selling the vegetables to local restaurants and markets. Nancy was with her Uncle John Mark the last 3 days of his life. She tells me that they sang hymns, including his favorite, I'll Fly Away, shared stories, and prayed. And even in the end, when he was no longer responsive, he could still hold Nancy's hand. Nancy writes, "I will sorely miss him all the rest of my days, but I know he's up there in heaven cracking jokes, cracking everyone up, and watching over my sisters and me. Praise be to God." Uncle John Mark, a hero, not because of the big things, but because of the daily small steps he took, the consistent life of love and light that he lived, helping his young niece when her dad wasn't around, caring for his parents as they grew older, and still bringing light even on his last day of life as he held his niece's hand. A simple life well lived is heroic enough. A daily step taken closer to the light is step enough. A moment giving more love than you gave before is love enough to create a hero's journey for a lifetime. That's the invitation that Christ brings to us when he invites us to be the light of the world with him. It's not always easy. It's much easier with a community. But it's beautiful when we keep taking those steps and letting each step change us into a better version of ourselves. Letting each moment of love transform us into a more loving version of ourselves. And letting the people around us bring out the best in us as we bring out the best in them. Think about Dorothy and those silly characters on the yellow brick road, thinking they were going off to the wonderful, wonderful Wizard of Oz, who was actually nothing more than a man hiding behind a curtain. But ultimately it didn't matter because they kept taking steps forward faithfully toward the light of the Emerald City, deeper in their friendship and love for one another. And they changed each other by a lot. A cowardly lion found his courage. A tin man with an empty chest found his heart. And a scarecrow who thought he was a man of very little brain turned out to be the brainiest of all. And a young girl who thought she didn't know how to get her hero's journey to home found her way home through her own power. That's an imaginary story, but it's our story too. Some of us are cowardly lions. Some of us have lost connection with our hearts. Some of us think we're not smart enough, we're not good enough, we're not big enough, we're not brave enough. But together, we can get this journey going. Together, we can encourage each other to keep moving forward. Together, we can embrace a new pastor. It's a big stretch for us. Big stretch for what's next. But we can do this. He's going to change us. And we're going to change him, just as Dorothy and her friends changed each other. Just as Jesus and his disciples changed each other. Just as you and I have changed each other this last year and a half together. But we're ready for the adventure. And it's better than a yellow brick road going to some man pretending to be a mighty wizard. Because this is the journey of bringing God's kingdom to earth, of bringing love to life, and bringing light to a world that is far too in love with the shadows. Let's be that light. Let's be that love. And let's enjoy the journey together. Amen.